Hello and welcome to part 6 of the Make a Game with Unity series, in which we will use some C# programming to let the enemies appear and hide at random times. In the last part I added the method to move the enemy upwards using the iTween asset here in the soldier script, and now we'll move these 3 lines that are here in the start method of the soldier script to a separate method that I will call move upwards. So I select these 3 lines, and then at the light bulb there is an extract method. And that's very cool because when you click this, a new method containing these lines that you selected is created. Then I rename this to move upwards and we're done. Now we have a separate method for this logic. Okay, next step. I will add 3 public variables to control how long it takes an enemy to appear and disappear and how long the duration of the shooting is. I call these float variables uptime, shoot time and downtime. The uptime variable I use in the move upwards method and replace this magic number here. Now we are able to configure these times from outside the script. Okay, I also need a move downwards method, so I will copy and paste the move upwards and rename it. The logic is quite the same, but the y-axis value is reduced by 2 units and it uses the downtime variable for the duration. Now I can call these 2 methods like here in the start method of the soldier, but for the move downwards I will use the invoke method to call it, because this allows me to call this method after a certain time, and for this duration I will use the shoot time variable. And when we start the game now you can see that this soldier is moving up and then moving down again. The logic to make this soldier shoot at us will be added in the next part. But of course I don't want to call this method on start, I want to call it from a separate script that controls the movement of the soldiers. So define a new method that starts the movement, call it activate, and it has to be public so that it is callable from other scripts. So move these lines into the new method activate that we just added and define public access instead of private. Now let's create a script to control the enemies, and a good name would be enemy controller. First we have to create a new empty game object as a kind of holder for the script. Then I create the new C# script inside of our scripts folder and attach it to the new empty game object. Then I double click to open the enemy controller script and define an array of soldier objects. This will be a list of all the enemies that are added to the scene. Now when I open again the editor, you can see that this enemy property is visible because we defined it as a public property. Then I can define the size, this is the number of enemies that I want to add, and then I just drag the soldier objects to the slots to fill the array. So now I have the possibility to iterate, for example, over all the enemies in the list and call the activate method. When I do this in the start method, both soldiers will appear when I start the game. The only thing that we have to take care of is that the enemy is initialized before the enemy controller. So we use the awake method instead of the start method for the enemy that is invoked by Unity before the start method is called. And then I start, and as you can see the 2 soldiers appear and disappear. Okay, nice, but still not what I want. I want them to appear one after the other randomly. So back to the enemy controller script and the update method that is called for every frame. And I will use the class random to generate a random number with a range of the number of enemies in the enemies list. And this number is the index of the soldier that should be activated. I use this index to get the enemy from my list and call the method activate for this object. But of course I don't want to call this all the time, I have to check if there's already an active enemy. So let's go back to the enemy script and introduce an active flag, a new bool variable that is set to true when the activate method is called. Then we know that the enemy is currently active. Okay, but when do we set this variable again to false? Well, we could do this here in the move downwards method, but that's a bit too early because the enemy is still visible at this time, right? I will show you how to optimize this in a moment. But first I will add a public property called isActive that we can use in the enemy controller to get the active state of the enemy. It just returns the bool variable isActive. Alright, and now I'll show you how to use iTween to find out when the move downwards animation of the enemy is really finished. I use a second overload of the method moveTo with a hashtable parameter where we can register a method that is called when the animation is finished. All parameters can be specified as before, the time span of the animation or the used axis, but we have to define them as parameters of this hash method. OnComplete defines a function which is called when moveTo is finished. I call this function onDownComplete. We also have to specify the target where this function is defined, and that's in our case our own game object. In the method onDownComplete I can reset my isActive variable now to false, and I can be sure that this is the correct time to do this. Okay, the last step now is to move back to the enemy controller and add this for each loop to the update method and check if there is already an active enemy. And if this is the case, we return from this update method because we don't want to activate another one. Okay, let's give it a try, start the game, and here the second one appears again, and now the first one. Alright guys, that's it for this part. I know it was a bit tricky. In the next one we will add the shoot logic and animation for the enemies. I really hope you liked this series and my channel, and if you do, then please don't forget to subscribe to not miss a future video. Thanks a lot for watching, and think about supporting me on my Patreon, this would be really nice, and I hope you come back soon to JNM.